We're an hour late. Let's do this.
Okay. So I'm very zenful right now in this makeshift temple.
It is a temple.
I'm sure your clients
This is
like
where the
that.
magic happens.
It
So-
is a comfortable room.
So T's back with us, and today we have Lauren Goldbach. And I was going to call you doctor, and I know I'm not supposed to because you're not a doctor, right?
Not a doctor, no.
But you have a lot of letters after your name.
I do
It's
have
like
letters.
alphabet soup of
Yep.
some shit. What letters are after your name?
I'm an LCSW, which is a licensed clinical social worker. And there are a lot of different, acronyms for most of us. They usually apply to what degree did you earn and what level of licensure do you have. So there's two different pieces that go with it. There's a degree and there's a license. You can get a degree and not get a license. You can get a degree in counseling, social work. Basically, those are the two. Psychology doesn't really get you into counseling necessarily. So I'm at the level of master's. You got your bachelor's, master's, doctorate, and then medical school.
MD, right?
MD, right. So psychiatrists, which is what usually people confuse us with, are medical doctors. They prescribe medication. None of us at the PhD or master's level prescribe medication. So,
all right.
Yeah.
So you can do everything except deal drugs, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So T, today we're in a studio of learned people.
She said fancy words, and
Yeah.
I peed a little because I don't know.
I don't.
Like
yeah.
I don't think
I
I,
feel a
should
little
be sitting here
inadequate
with
at
this.
this
What are
point.
the fancy words?
Yeah, I don't know. But
Yeah.
I'm sure we're going to hear some. So, Lauren is on our advisory board, right? And you volunteer with Pistol, which we appreciate tremendously. And she's going to talk about, what the fuck's wrong with our brain?
Yes.
And most of our podcasts are a bunch of cops bullshitting and drinking. I should be drinking.
No one brought mimosas.
Yeah. So, but we're trying to be professionals here. I thought about wearing my glasses to look studious in the house of the learned people, but I'm not going to be able to keep up with these big words. So, if you start using big words like demigula, is that amygdala?
Amygdala? Yep.
Amygdala, whatever the hell that is.
We will stop you.
We'll
and say,
clarify.
what
We'll
the
need
fuck?
clarification on that,
Okay.
just so you know. You have at least 100 more years of school than I do, so I'll probably defer to you on a lot of questions. So with that being said, how long have you been? Well, just introduce yourself. I already said your name, and the beautiful blue hair goes with the background.
Thank you. It's a busy
Did
room.
you do that on purpose?
I did. I like
Okay.
blue.
So, and your dress.
It's all about the blue.
Is it a chakra thing? Is that why you do it? You just balance the chakras? Is that?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's blue. I like blue.
All right. Well,
She brought it down to our level. She just likes.
she
it.
just
I
like blue. That's
just
good for
like
me.
blue.
Okay.
Dumb it down.
Dumb it down. Yep. I've got the mandalas are on the wall for brain spotting. They look kind of busy, but they allow people to pick a visual space that they can focus on while we're doing our work. So that's the purpose of the busy behind me, and it's blue because I like blue. So okay, yeah, let's introduce myself. My name's Lauren Jones-Goldbach. I have a degree in social work, a master's degree in social work. I'm licensed independently. I have certificates in. I'm currently working on a neuropsych certificate, and I have a CCDP, which is a Certified Clinical Trauma Professional certificate, which means I've done extensive additional training after graduating my master's degree for trauma work. I'm trained in EMDR and brain spotting.
Voodoo.
Voodoo
That's
magic.
easy, voodoo.
Yep, as my guys call it.
Yeah, that's voodoo.
Yeah.
Where's your degree from? ASU.
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 Got my
yeah.
master's at ASU.
That's
Yep.
woo. Okay, so you've got your credentials down for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Why this profession? What led you to this profession?
Honestly,
Were you nosy?
well,
You just
yeah,
wanted to see crazy
right.
people.
I'm a looky Lou. I think I've wanted to be a counselor since I was in high school. I had a pretty rough childhood. My dad was a Vietnam vet and a military by career. He was an officer in the Marine Corps. And I think sometime in high school I met someone who was really, really helpful, and I decided I wanted to do the same. So that was always my career goal. It took a while to get there. I got sidetracked, done everything but the pole, worked at FedEx, postal carrier, waitress. All the
Now, were you a
things.
nerd growing up? Because I think like doctors, before were nerds, right? Like
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
bookworms in the book, reading big words. Were you a
No.
nerd? Come on.
No.
Were you like just totally the opposite spectrum of that?
I
You know where I'm going with this.
am. I think I was Ali Sheedy in the Breakfast Club. That's far from nerd.
Did you ride a bike? Did you have?
No. It's a wonder I don't have a felony background. I was not a well-behaved teenager.
Troublemaker.
I was a troublemaker. I
Get in where
partied
you
my
fit
way
in.
out
That's
of
why
U of
she's
A.
here.
Yeah, first 2 years at U of A, just partied my way right out. Took a while to get back into school, and could probably. Well, yeah, I've had a colorful life, so not nerd.
Yeah. And somewhere in between there, you had a crotch rocket, right? Like you were.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a ZZR6. Yeah,
Wow.
Kawasaki. Also blue.
Oh.
Oh, blue. Oh. Well,
Shocker.
in gang terms, you'd be a crip, but in every other terms, you're just crazy.
Just crazy.
So-
yeah, I got rid of the bike about 5 years ago.
Right.
5 years ago.
And
6.
so now, and I guess that's probably why we really, not just besides your background, but moreover, you're the reason I love you working with us is because you're just like the most average person of all the doctors. I've seen like 13 doctors the whole time. And some doctors' offices had like stuffed animals and shit in it. And the one lady, she's like, I got upset from going through my cognitive therapy or whatever they had me doing. And she's like, do you want to hug a stuffed animal? And I was like, no, I want to fucking stab the stuffed animal. I noticed you don't have stuffed animals in here, so I appreciate that. Oh, wait.
Got a few little ones.
What is that? Is that? No, she had huge, Lauren, she had huge.
Great big teddy
state
bears.
fair,
Yeah.
weird kind of sexual looking things. So
That's my sloth. My son gave me that. I have batarangs right behind you, but they're foam. We don't hug things.
those are swim paddles.
We hit things in here.
Yeah. See, I have to hit people.
Not
I don't
a lot
want to
of
hit
hugging.
like things. Like people needs to be hit sometimes.
Sometimes we can pretend.
Yeah. So that's why I love having you help us and volunteer. And I know the feedback from the officers has been great because they're so used to seeing the same stuffy doctors, right?
Yeah.
Male or female, doesn't matter. My neuropsychologist, I'm sure he got a boner once every year. He was that stuffy. It was just not I couldn't, you know what I mean? He was stiff.
Yeah.
He looked down on me and I was like, this is just fucking horrible.
Well, and that's, I've been to therapy throughout my life at various times. And I remember back in college, I went to this one guy and he would sit there and he would pick the lint off his pants the whole
my
time.
gosh.
That's a freak.
The whole time I talked, sorry, I cuss a lot. The whole time I was talking to him, he was just, and I'm like, am I boring you? I've been to the one who sits with her back to you while she types.
Oh my God, I had one of those.
Yep.
Oh, I did. I was like, are you listening? What are you doing? Playing
No, they're not listening.
Sudoku or what are you doing back
Facebook,
there? Like,
and
I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. At least when I Facebook, I'm hiding it, like, so they can't really.
Oh my gosh! Stop the madness.
That's right on. Hey, you're honest. That's what I like. See, at least you know. So
I try not to have a computer out. I think it's so impersonal to be typing while I have a notepad that I write and take a few notes. I try not to take very detailed notes, but
so
enough
you
to
should
help.
know, and I've told this to Dr. Tapia, my doctor, and we'll get to that on your learning from EMDR through that. But as a police officer, especially when you're doing interviews, the more you write, the more the suspect starts to shut down.
Yeah.
So do you guys ever think like that with your patients? Because when I would see the doctors writing, I considered that evidence. Like, you're documenting the shit I'm saying.
Yeah. I want to know what you're writing.
Yeah. So, and I don't know that, I can't speak for other clinicians, but I know that with my LEOs, I write very minimal notes. I always tell them I'm writing very minimal notes. I don't document a whole lot, but I do that with all my patients. I try not to document too much, just enough. And I do let them know, because I think that especially for law enforcement, when they see me, they'll say something and I'm like,
You're like, weirdo.
instantly they go, oh. And I don't blame them. I think that's how you're trained, right? This is all documentation, and how's that going to be used? And
well, but that documentation, not to cut you off,
Yeah.
but that documentation to us is a threat, because that
Absolutely.
can go
Yep.
back and hurt us, right? If
Yeah.
we're telling you that we're having these thoughts, these intrusive thoughts about homicide or suicide, that can hurt us. And so that isn't the same as like I'm taking your statement to make you a better witness or a better victim,
Right.
it's immediately a threat.
Yeah, so the thing that I let everybody know, and this should be all clinicians, is that our notes are they're HIPAA protected. No one can see them, theoretically, nobody, unless they're subpoenaed.
Right.
And I've had my notes subpoenaed once, and I redacted, I think, just about everything in them, and nobody said anything, so that was okay. But I try to, it's a fine line when you take ethics training on how to do notes as far as what they say you should and shouldn't have in them. I kind of try to use my own judgment to not harm. That's always my first intent. So that if the notes were called upon or something were to happen, would this harm the officer? Because you're looking at a balancing act. And this I learned from Dr. Tapia. If you give the wrong diagnosis, like PTSD up front, it can harm chances down the road to get disability if they don't act on it within the first year, unless that law has changed. So you have to be careful with diagnoses. You have to be careful with what you put in the notes to protect the officer and their career. But you also have to make sure that you're doing your due diligence for the public and the officer. If they're not safe, what do you do?
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense.
I think it's important for the officer to be able to feel comfortable enough to be able to say the things that need to get said, and it's not going to come back,
Well, and so...
Yeah, definitely. And so which is why I want to have that training that we're talking about having coming up for clinicians, because working with first responders is so different from the rest of the population. And knowing the humor, knowing the culture, knowing that if someone says to me the sort of things that Manny has said to me, that he's not actually going to plow anybody down, or this isn't going to happen, right? But if they don't know you, maybe it's a balancing act. If they don't know you well enough and they don't feel comfortable with you and they don't have that level of trust, then they're not going to tell you those things that are going on. And then we're never going to be able to get to is this normal? Right. So I try to tell them up front, look, these are the thoughts I think about running people over all the time. I just don't do it. That's what separates us from the criminals. We can talk about these things. I'm not going to have you hospitalized. I'm not going to look at you like you're crazy. It's the sort of thoughts that everybody has, right? And then you add to that the humor that cops have because of the things they've seen and done. And having an understanding of that is vital. Otherwise, you're sitting across from a clinician who doesn't know that you're not really a threat, right?
Right.
So I'll take a few steps back real quick, and I'll kind of tell you where I met Lauren. It was West Coast 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Mm-hmm. She was volunteering down there.
No, last year?
I don't know. 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Her and another clinician were there, and I just happened to be sitting with them, and her and I have a conversation about what's wrong with me, which is I hear screams. And up until that point, I had never met anyone who had that auditory memory or whatever the hell the technical term is. And she says, hey, I heard shit for a long time. And I was like, trying not to break down, because I was like, holy shit, I'm not the only one. So I think as like when we go into the podcast a little bit more, part of what I've learned with clinicians and doctors is that when they're more human, it's a lot easier for us to trust you guys, right? If I think the doctor sitting across from me's never experienced this and is just smart, it's really hard for me to draw the association.
Yeah. So the auditory stuff that you're talking about was I did crisis response with Phoenix and Chandler. And Chandler has longer shifts. So does Phoenix, actually. Both of them require, I think, 24-hour shifts or 12-hour shifts. So you're sleeping there, and you get the tones, like, all the time sometimes. And then I started hearing the tones at, like, grocery stores, at home, in my car. Someone's phone would go off, I'd hear the tone, and I had this startle response that went with it.
Even though the tones weren't there, right? So it wasn't like you were hearing tones that were legitimately there.
Tones that sounded close, like that when the door squeaked before I WT-40'd the hell out of it. One of my firefighters was like, it sounded just like every time it would go. So if I heard a tone like that sounded similar, but I was also hearing tones when there was no sound.
Right.
None. I would be laying in bed and I'd hear a tone and I would sit up.
Yeah.
And it went on for a while, and I went to see somebody who we both know. And this person's like, I've never heard of that. And I'm like, well, this happens to be my field of study, so I know that this is a thing, and you just don't know what it is.
She told me the exact same thing. She's a liar. Fibber.
Yeah. You got to be careful who you go to. That's such a potential to harm people. But I think that this is a common thing, and I talk to a lot of my clients who also hear tones or get interrupted with those disturbances just in times of sitting and there's nothing else going on. So I think that which is what we talked about at West Coast. That's what inspired me to start working more with law enforcement, was getting a better feel for some of the things that you guys see. And
right. And yeah. So let's jump into it, and let me ask you a very direct question.
Ooh.
Here we go.
What's it
Can
gonna
I have
be?
the sloth?
What the fuck is going on with my brain?
With the tones and the, yeah.
Well, I'm just saying,
Frames.
so T and I have talked before in the past, and I know you and I have talked before. So if I get triggered or something happens, like I have to rub my brow and shit, and it feels like just the whole front part of my head is on fire. And
It's always the same spot. It's always the front that just
yeah. So mine
hurts.
is like if you
Yeah.
just above my brow, about 1.5 inches, that whole spot. And I asked doctors, and they gave me these technical terms, and I know that there's officers out there that are going to see doctors or are worried about seeing doctors or clinicians. And for us, I'll speak for myself. I really didn't care what the fuck is in my brain, medically speaking. I just wanted to know why it was occurring. And I know T was excited because you have a prop over there. And I
Yay,
can see
brain.
it.
I got
It's
my
a brain.
Yeah, yeah.
So let me see the brain while you explain kind of. I'm not Vanna White, so I'm not going to like parade it around and stuff and kind of show you.
This is...
But it's 3 pieces.
Yeah, so we've got...
puzzle.
What you got going on,
gonna
the
be
brain,
stressed.
you have two halves of the brain, right? On the right side of the brain, you've got the limbic system, and that's where the alarm center is. So what's going on in your brain?
Is this the limbics?
Mm-hmm. It is. It's on the right side of the brain.
I don't know what that is. You can't even see it really.
Well,
But-
but it's inside. Okay, so why does it hurt where in the front?
This
Like
piece
what is
comes
going
out.
on?
Yeah, that's just your...
That's a broken part of me right here.
Oh geez.
that's where balance and coordination takes place.
That makes
The
sense.
cerebellum, yeah. And then back here, you've got the occipital lobes. Up here is the frontal.
Big words.
Yeah. So this is where you see where it's registered, and then on the front is your executive planning and all that. Why the brain hurts where it hurts? I don't have the answer for that exactly. I can tell you that one of the things that we learned in training for first responders is that PTSD symptoms present very differently than they do in the general population. Usually headaches, that's it. Headaches and irritability, sometimes anger, difficulty sleeping. None of the other symptoms that the general population would have, like flashbacks, screaming, all that kind of stuff. It's just headaches. What's going on in your brain is, and I'm gonna talk in terms of like smoke detectors. There's a really great book called The Body Keeps the Score that talks about trauma and what it does to the body. So in our brains, in the limbic system, we have the equivalent of right in there. Yep.
You should have never handed him
Yeah.
anything.
You're not even listening, are you, man?
I am. I'm trying to figure out what lady
Talking my brain off
cerebellum
here.
is.
There's a cerebellum.
Cerebellum.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got an alarm system in our brain that's set up kind of like a smoke detector. We're always scanning for threat. And when threat is detected, you get an alarm that sounds in the brain, and then you get a flood of chemicals, which is your fight or flight response. It's a massive cocktail. It's what lets you lift cars off of people and stuff like that. For most people, they'll have a response to a threat, and then they'll come back down to baseline within about 36 hours, because that's how long it takes to flush all of those chemicals out of the body. But they're not living in a constant state of threat the way law enforcement is. So what's happening with you guys is a couple of different things. You've got a hypervigilance that goes on that's actually taught in academy, right? You're taught to stay safe. Otherwise, the job
Yeah,
is...
you have to stay in, what is it?
You
Red?
have, you have to stay. You're supposed to
You're
stay
supposed
in.
to stay in
well,
red, right?
Aren't
Not
you supposed
yellow.
to stay in orange? Isn't it orange?
I
Like
don't
they
know.
make it up in between.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's...
alert.
Alert,
Whatever
absolutely.
alert
Yeah,
is.
it's so when you come up on a scene that anybody else would look at and go, oh, this is fine, because people don't have the experiences or the training you do. You're coming up on the scene going, this could be potentially life-threatening all the time, while at the same time thwarting the responses that the rest of us have, meaning stuffing them down. And this is where I got the appreciation for law enforcement working with crisis. We would roll up on some places that were already secured, and I'm like, I'm not getting out of the car. There's no way I'm going in there.
Danger.
Yeah, all the alarms are going off, right? This is not a good place to be. And I had to shove that down and go in and do what I needed to do. And those places were secure and already safe. You guys are going into places that you have to secure.
Right.
right? Everyone else is staging. And
Right.
so
We know who those people are. Second
know.
responders. You can
Yeah.
say
I
it.
have a lot of respect for them too.
Second responders.
So you're going in, your alarms are going off because you're already trained to stay in that level of hypervigilance, which means you're flooding your body with these chemicals. You're not at a baseline that the rest of us are living at, going, life is okay until it isn't. You're way up here. Does that make sense? And at the same time, you're shoving down all the normal responses, which is to nope the f- out of there, which is what most of us would do. So you got to stifle that response that's normal. You're living up here, and you're there for your entire shift mostly. Even when you think you're just sitting back doing paperwork, eating, relaxing, chatting with your coworkers, with other people, you're still in a heightened level.
Right.
And that starts to change the neurobiology of the brain. The brain starts to look different. Then you guys compartmentalize and you don't process the things that you've seen, right? You put them in a box and you put them aside and you go to the next call, the next call, the
Right.
next call. There's no downtime. So you're living in this constant state of hypervigilance, and then you come home, and instead of coming back to baseline like most people would after a threat, you're going into a state of collapse.
Below the line.
Below the line, exactly. They call it the roller coaster of hypervigilance, right? So you're either way up here with your chemicals or you're completely shut off. And this is where I get the most complaints from spouses, where they'll tell me he doesn't want to go to the gym. He doesn't do anything but watch TV. He just sits there. He's not connected, or she.
Right.
And that's, it looks like a choice. If you go to a clinician that doesn't understand law enforcement, it looks like depression, and then you get labeled as depressed.
Right.
But it's not.
Clinically depressed.
Exactly. And it's not. It's a physiological state, a biological state of shutdown. And it's the entire time you're there, and then you get back out there and you're back up here. So there's always up, down, up, down. There's no level of
So we're,
in between.
if I'm understanding correctly, we're training our brains to do something it's not supposed to do.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And then is it like just leaving the faucet on and letting it run with all those, whatever you call them?
And so then it's a good way to put it, because I tell a lot of my guys, your bucket's full, right? If you don't know that it's full, I'll have people come in and they'll go, I'm watching TV, and I'll start crying. And I'm not sad. I don't feel anything, but there's tears running down my face. What the well, your bucket's full, right? The nervous system has now reached a state of overload. So the way I explain it to them, either you tell them that the smoke detector is going off all the time, right? And that takes a toll on your body. But I think a better way to put it would be this. The nervous system is obviously its nerves. And if you've ever had a toothache, when you have a toothache, you can't drink water because if it touches the tooth, it's like, oh, mother,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Everything hurts the tooth when you have a toothache. I view the nervous system when it's in this state of sympathetic nervous system dominance or fight or flight dominance. You're constantly in that heightened alert state or hypervigilance. It's like having a massive toothache, but it goes through the whole nervous system. And so just like a toothache, everything's going to hurt. So when you're in that state, someone talking to you is going to bother you. Kids running around screaming or talking is going to bother. Does that make sense? Everything
is that why
bothers
all
a
the
toothache.
noise? Is that why there's so much noise in every time we go anywhere? There's just, even if it's not
Background
necessarily
din.
that loud, the background noise is
Yeah.
so loud.
Yep.
Sometimes just one person talking to me. I can be in a room with one person and I want them to shut up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it can be your child, it can be your spouse. And I try to explain this to families. I go, it's not personal. You're coming up on a toothache and you want to hug it. It's like touching a sunburn, right? It's going to hurt. Things that normally wouldn't bother other people are going to exacerbate a nervous system that's already on edge. And like you said, sometimes it's really benign sounds. I have people who don't want to go to restaurants. They can't go to a grocery store because just the level of everyday noise going on around them is very disturbing.
Yeah.
And they don't understand what that is, right? So then that creates this whole, what's wrong with me? You've got this culture in law enforcement of don't crack, right?
And then I think we get mad because we don't know what's going on with us, and we can't go to the grocery store and be normal. And then, because I just got mad that I couldn't do anything that I could do before, which was, didn't seem like anything going to the grocery store. How
Right. What's
what
wrong
could
with me?
possibly be wrong
Yeah.
with me that I can't even go to the grocery store anymore?
Yeah, and if you try to view it in terms of a toothache, you didn't cause the toothache just is. When it's bad, it's bad, and then when it comes back down, it comes back down.
Right.
If you put it in those physiological terms, it makes a lot more sense than going, there's something wrong with your mind, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard to drink water or eat ice cream when you have a toothache. It's hard to go to the grocery store when your whole nervous system is on fire, but you don't really feel it. And I think that's the biggest thing, because first responders compartmentalize so well that they'll come to me and they'll go, I don't feel upset. You're telling me I've got this disorder, this PTSD, and I feel fine. my eyes are leaking all the time and I'm kind of irritable. But other than that,
I tremble.
I have headaches. I have headaches, but I'm fine. Yeah, but these small, subtle symptoms that look like not much to you are actually an indication of something very big that's happening. And it's going on with most of the first responders. Because there's no way to be a cop and not live in a state of vigilance when you're on the job. We don't want you to not.
Right.
You need to
Well, you can't be like ignorant to threats. You know, you can't just be in a world of rainbows and butterflies all day. So when we do that, what damage and where is that damage in my head?
Well, some of the physiological differences in the brain, if you scan them with someone who has PTSD, you're going to see an enlarged amygdala. That's the emotional center of the brain. That's in the limbic system over here.
Oh, I don't even have it. I'm just pointing at it.
So it's right in here. It's the part that's involved in emotion. You're going to see a smaller, sometimes hippocampus, which is involved in memory.
What's hippocampus?
It's a part of the brain
that thing that goes underwater at the zoo.
I call it the VCR. The hippopotamus. I call it the VCR of the brain. It's involved in memory.
It's the important part.
Yeah, and so what I see with a lot of my clients who come in and have had years on the job is they're starting to get forgetful, and that's alarming to them because
do you have any forgetful?
What time was I supposed to be here today?
Right.
Oh, well, that's true. I think, but yours is different. Like you can remember names, you can remember stuff, and
but I can't remember.
I have a different extreme.
My short-term memory is shit.
Yeah,
short-term's terrible.
And that's where things start to get funky, right? I've got guys who will say there are things that were super routine and I'm forgetting to do them now, and I think I'm developing like dementia, or it's usually it's not. You know, you've got memory problems when you've got constant
it feels like it, like trying to do something or even screw around with the computer or write a paper or something it's a task.
Right.
Well, I think it's hard to decipher between as we get older. You're going to have
some level of memory issues.
You're going to have some level of memory, but there's no way it can be this level of memory at prior to 50 years old.
Right. And that's alarming for someone who lives their life and their job remembering things, noticing detail, paying attention to things that are life or death important. You got to think of it as when those alarms sound in the brain and when you get stuck in that sympathetic nervous system dominance, that fight or flight state, it's similar to a drowning man. So you got this thing like you got this nervous system that's like a toothache, but you've also got alarms going off like you're drowning. And when you're drowning, there isn't room to talk about dinner or where we want to go for the kids' birthday party.
Exactly. That's why I don't like those fucking questions when they ask me.
There's no space for that because if someone's drowning, it's just taking the next breath, right? And that's what fight or flight is. It's that state of I need to survive this moment right here and now. And that's difficult for families to understand too. So I try to explain to them, that every single person I work with, they'll come home and their spouse will go, how was your day? And this question short circuits most of them because first of all, I'm not going to tell you what I saw today and did.
Right.
Is that a trick question?
Right. And second of all, I can't answer it because I'm still trying to decompress, right? I'm coming in the house off of this roller coaster of up here and I'm getting ready to collapse. And there's no social engagement going on,
but
relationship
physically,
building.
we don't look any different. Okay, so everything looks normal with you. So,
and that's where partners get tripped up. And I've spent session after session sometimes with some spouses going, trust me, it's physiological. And they're going, well, I think it's choice. And this isn't one spouse. This is all the spouses going, they look fine.
You're right.
And okay, they look fine, but you can't see if we PET scan this person's brain, you're going to see a whole lot of stuff going on that is really under the surface, and that's alarms sounding and then a complete shutdown of the system, right? So you're asking questions that are sort of normal. What do you want to eat? And this person's like, I just want to sit and turn on the TV.
Right. No questions, please.
And decompress.
So just by chance the other day, I saw that little girl singer Grande, whatever, Ariana Grande,
old man.
She actually released a brain scan of her brain saying she has PTSD.
Oh, following the shooting, was it at her concert or something?
And her boyfriend died.
Did he?
Yeah. I don't know. But anyways, I'm not judging and I'm not saying
we're not minimizing Ariana's pain.
Yeah. But now, so she posts this on social media and everybody's like, oh my God, save her. We got to bring awareness to mental health and shit. And so I was thinking, take a brain scan of one of our guys or one of our gals or me and see what it looks. I think my brain scan would look like it got hit with a 12 gauge shotgun. and it's just peppered with fucking holes.
Yeah, I've got some brain scans on my website. I think they're still up. If not, I'll put them up again, that show a brain with PTSD and one that doesn't have it. And you'll see parts of the brain lit up. Those are the parts involved in that fight or flight response, right? And it's constantly lit up, like a Christmas tree, all lit up. It's interesting that you say that about Ariana Grande, because one of the quotes that I love is that if a 747 went down once a year, killing 300 people, they would ground them until they figured out what the problem was.
Yeah.
But nobody does anything about the number of suicides, which outnumber the line of duty deaths
Right.
astronomically.
In police officers.
Because we're not
Absolutely.
Ariana Grande.
Yeah.
So
well, yeah,
they
and I'm
don't
sure,
care.
and I'm sure she's going to get, a lot
A GoFundMe going, you know.
Right.
Yeah, well, she
She'll
needs
get
that.
a lot of stuff when
Yeah.
we have all these police officers.
So,
that,
how do we?
is there something that we can do as we go through our career to? Didn't we have somebody wanting to know prevention? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah. That's a great question. So you're looking at a couple of. It looks very depressing, right? When we talk about what's physiologically going on in your brains and what the job does to you
Right.
guys. But I work with two components in my work with LEO, and the first one is teaching them about their nervous system. If you've got a toothache, how do you calm that nerve? So
Pull the tooth.
You pull the tooth.
Just get rid of that motherfucker right now.
See, that's the
So quit my job
That's
is what
the
you're saying.
747 going down. There are exercises that you can do that stimulate the vagus nerve, right? That's all this technical talk. But you can do exercises that send a signal to the brain that says the threat is over. The bear is gone. You're done drowning. It's time to relax and go into rest and digest. So we have different parts of the nervous system. We have a rest and digest nervous system, and that's what most people live in, not you guys. We've got fight or flight, and we've got freeze and collapse. Those are three of the ones I work with. Freeze and collapse is either I'm going to hold really still and hope the threat doesn't see me, or I'm going to ball up and just check out until
Go to my safe space.
Yeah, go to your safe space, your happy place.
I've never done that on the job. I'm going to hold really still.
If I freeze.
You're not gonna see me.
That's where you guys go to when you get home, though. And it's not, we don't choose. It's a default, right? The brain picks what it's going to do, which is why a lot of victims of violent crimes didn't scream, didn't fight. They just froze. It also allows you to feel a painless death. So it numbs you with all of these opioids and other chemicals that just, if you're getting mauled, it's best to not feel it or be in it, right? So the exercises that I teach all of my clients, if they do them every single day, you do see a difference in a PET scan. If you PET scan someone's brain ahead of time and all those alarms are going off, and then they do these exercises every day for 30 days, say, there's a little bit less activity going on in the limbic system. Those alarms aren't sounding, and there's a little bit more rest and digest going on. So if we taught our law enforcement to use these exercises daily, physiologically changing their nervous system, it would help combat it. And then there's also other like behavioral things, purposefulness when you get home, making a plan before the shift is over, or even ahead of time. You know, every Saturday we're going to go to dinner so we don't have to think about it, and we're going to engage instead of allowing myself to sit on the couch, turn the TV on. We're going to go for a walk around the block. So that's the first piece.
Okay.
Things that you can do there. I have guys who will buy a fountain and sit and listen to it. The sound of water is useful, and then do those breathing exercises, which sound really, I'm going to tell you, it sounds like bullshit. But I went to this one training once. There were a couple neuroscientists that were putting it on because I never used to use breath in my session, breathing exercises. And they showed us all these brain scans of before and after these breath exercises for a month. And I'm like, holy crap, I've been missing the boat. So I show brain scans in my sessions when I can, or I show them the science behind it. And I say, you need to do these exercises. The second thing is that I talked earlier about how you guys stuff things down, because there were places we went where I'm like, I'm not getting out of the car.
Those are the places we wanted to get into.
Yeah,
Let's get in there.
yeah.
T, let's get in there. Something bad happening.
Yeah.
Kick the
But
door.
you can't do that unless you're stuffing down the normal human response,
Fear.
which is nope. Yeah, fear.
Right.
And fear is still in there. It's always sad and fascinating to me when I work with someone and we look back on what their worst call was, for example, and there's so much fear that was buried that they didn't even feel until they're sitting in session. But it gets trapped in the brain and in the body. It's just because you're not experiencing it doesn't mean you're not feeling it, and it's not in there somewhere in your coding, right? So all those responses that you're stuffing down, or we call them thwarted movements, they get stuck in the body. And you had asked earlier about tics and twitches, right?
Yes.
I was telling Manny about one of my patients who was in a car accident, and her thumb kept moving, right? Because she couldn't make a phone call. And for months after the car accident, her thumb would move. So we work with what we call somatic experiencing, or movements in the body, to release some of those trapped or thwarted movements, some of the fear response. there are many times when, for a lot of my guys, for example, it's people screaming in the background. That's one of the most disturbing things, right? Because you can't stop them. You can't shut them up. And you can't get away from it. So what do? You just shut it off and you go on with your job. But that gets stuck in there and as an unprocessed memory of someone you couldn't shut up. Right?
A lot of those people can't shut them up.
Yeah, or there's movements that we want to do. I'm not going to describe what they are when you're on scene, and they're socially and politically unacceptable.
Right.
And those are some of the movements that I've got. Resistance bands in my office. I've got squeeze balls. I've got those batarangs. We use those to work out some of those movements that couldn't happen in a call.
T and I can really get it on with this thing right here.
Oh, gee, stop giving
When
him
you
toys.
piss me off,
Can hit the sloth
we'll
with it.
start swinging this.
Yeah. So I use resistance bands. We move the feet, we move the hands. I'll use body movements. I'll give someone resistance and let them slowly punch with the fist as they push back on my hand.
Punch.
Yeah, pull it in all the way back.
Pull my hand.
Yeah, and then just slowly push as hard as you can.
Push forward?
Yeah, as hard as you can.
I'm weak.
Oh my God. Anyway, those are somatic experiencing exercises that we do, right? And so I'll have them ball up and then really slowly kind of move forward with stuff and if you think about it, these are normal human responses that you're not allowed to use that make sense, that could take place in the moment, right? So letting someone work through that in session actually helps that memory, for lack of a better term, sort of loosen up and get processed and put away. And it's no longer in there repeating itself, coming out in nightmares.
So what's the difference between, I don't know, at the end of shift, just going and working out, and you work out, but you're still in my opinion, if I went to go work out after a shift, I was just stuffing it further and, trying to work out and run away from it, I guess. Or going for a run, right? Like if I go for a run, in my mind, I'm trying to outrun that as much as possible. Because I think sometimes some of our members will say, when I get home, I need to go run.
Yeah.
Or fishing. And the wife and the spouses, are like, well, you've been working 40 hours and now you want to leave us to go to the gym for 2 hours.
Yeah. I think that going to the gym and running and fishing, all those things are helpful. They don't process the memory itself, but they can help you get some of that movement going. And exercise is good for you because it's a good antidepressant. Fishing actually, I think, is helpful only because fishing is similar to brain spotting. You're focused on one spot. You're letting your mind just wander. Your eyes will usually fall where they want to go, which is sort of the theory behind brain spotting. So activities like that are helpful. It's different from TV. You're just fixing your eyes on the lake, relaxing, not thinking of anything, and your mind just does what it needs to do.
So you just touched on brain spotting, and I know you do EMDR, right? I think you went through Dr. Tapia's class, learned EMDR. And so and we'll get into EMDR with another doctor, but you're going to get into brain spotting. But real quick, what does EMDR stand for?
Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
And for the cops out there, it's just like HGN, like
Back and forth
with your eyes.
Yeah. Eyes, tapping, holding tappers, sound, anything that's bilateral.
Weird buzzies and voodoo. Now, is that a reset of the brain? Are you trying to reset the brain at that point from what we did wrong?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple theories on why EMDR works. And the first theory is that it mimics eye movement in sleep, rapid eye movement. We don't learn until we sleep. So what happens is you'll have an experience during the day. It'll get stored in one part of the brain. You sleep, and it gets processed and put into long-term memory. So we know now that if you want to learn something for a test, you have to read it the day before, sleep on it, and wake up. That's when it's in long-term memory. Traumatic memories that you guys have that you put in a box and don't process, don't get put into long-term memory usually. They're stored in a part of the brain where if you, again, PET scan someone and say, remember that one call, their brain is going to light up like they're seeing it for the first time, hearing it for the first time. The body's going to respond like it's feeling it right here and now, and that's not supposed to happen in a memory. We're supposed to go, I remember I had Cheerios last week for breakfast, or all week.
So then that makes sense because usually in a critical incident, especially like an OIS, like officer-involved shooting, they want you to walk that scene that same night. So you're saying that it would be better if after the shooting they sent you home, said sleep on it, and then interviewed you the next day or the day after because you're going to have a better recollection of the shooting?
You're going to have a different recollection if you process it in your sleep, possibly. And I think that's why they want you to, but I don't know what the procedural reason for that
different
is.
Meaning what? Because
well, when you process, you can shift how things looked. You can shift how you responded. You can alter the memory. All kinds of things can happen once you process it
which
and
would
put
be
it
the
away.
most correct, though?
It's hard to say because you can have 50 witnesses to a car accident and they're all going to give you a different color of a car, right? So it's not necessarily any more or any less accurate when you sleep. In EMDR, the memories can shift, though, and they can become drastically different from what they were before. And sometimes we want that. I'll have officers rewrite the outcome of a call, and we'll use that in our processing, and then they shift how they remember the entire call. But that's kind of important.
But which are they remembering? The
How
more
they
accurate way, or the way they thought they remembered
the
it?
way they need to remember it.
I think that's what I did with EMDR.
Yeah.
Because originally I didn't understand that, because all I was seeing was what the bad thing was that I saw. But when I changed it to be what really happened, then I was able to
process
put it away or do it doesn't I don't have those problems anymore. The same kind of issues.
It can change the meaning of an event as well, right? You get a new meaning that comes out of it, or that call was effective and I thought it wasn't.
Meaning. I get the true meaning out of it because obviously my brain told me something bad happened when it really didn't happen.
That can happen. It can shift how you perceive it. It can shift your belief about it. But the memory itself can also shift drastically. Sometimes we'll rewrite the memory and things will happen that never happened. And that's okay. Covering up a body that needed to be covered up but couldn't be.
Which
right?
could potentially appear as though you're being misleading or deceiving in your interview.
Well,
right?
Yeah,
because
and
if I'm involved in a critical incident like an officer involved shooting, and I say he had a gun, and they said, yeah, he didn't have a gun. No, he had a gun.
It was a daisy.
But it was, a cell phone.
Yeah.
Right. And so it seems and appears to be deceiving or misleading.
Well, you don't want to do EMDR if there's a pending case or an investigation. So and there are rules about who we will and won't do them with. If there's a victim I'm working with and they still have to testify, then there has to be a discussion with the lawyers and everybody else to decide, do the benefits outweigh the risk, which is they're going to get on the witness stand and maybe not be a reliable witness anymore.
Right.
Because the memories will alter sometimes. I mean, drastically. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes you'll just get a different meaning out of it, right? Or you'll see it from a different angle.
Right.
The goal is to be removed from the memory and not living it. So a traumatic memory is a memory that hasn't been processed. It's in a raw format, and the body and the brain don't know it's over. You're still experiencing it over and over and over. And EMDR, so back to why does it work, right? One of the theories is that eye movement or the bilateral stimulation mimics REM sleep, which is when we learn. You're able to take that memory that wasn't learned and put away and put it into long-term memory. So it's no longer active, happening right here and now. Does that make sense?
So you're not sleeping on it. You're actually awake and
and reprocessing it. And that's the idea of the reprocessing. The second theory, so there's two different theories on why it works and no one really knows. And the second theory is dual attunement. You can't notice something going back and forth and focus on a memory at the same time. And in that separation of what you're paying attention to, you unpair that response of being in the memory. Right? So I'm distracting. I'm going, remember that thing. And I'm also going boom, 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 boom. And your brain's like, I don't know which one I'm supposed to be doing. And it unpairs so that you're no longer living that memory over and over again. You PET scan the brain again. And usually when there's a successful course of treatment, you've got the part of the brain that lights up that shows you that it's now long-term memory. It's not happening right here and now. So when we talked about parts of the brain, you've got occipital lobes, right? That's
another big word.
Uh-oh.
Can you spell that? Spell it.
OCCIT, occipit,
Hooked on phonics.
Just say
Shut
no.
up.
Just say no.
Anyway,
that was on
okay,
the
so
test.
back here, right? I failed. Back here, you've got the occipital lobes, and this is where the brain will light up if you're looking at something, right? Visual. So when you scan someone and they've got a traumatic memory, these will light up like they're seeing it right here and now, and that's not supposed to really happen. And parts of the body will also respond as though that's that twitching and other movements that we see. We look for those micro movements when we're doing brain spotting and EMDR, hopefully, so that you can see where the body is storing some of that energy.
So when I was doing EMDR, my doctor was, Dr. Tapia is like, I've never seen anyone dissociate as much as you do, and it didn't work. And you were talking about the brain doing two different things at one time and can't, unraveling and stuff. So I was with one of our clinicians, her. We had coffee, and I had a test. I gave her a test, and I took my phone and I turned on a police scanner, and I had her hold that to her left ear, and then I said, "Now you and I are going to have a conversation." And she could not.
She couldn't attune to both,
right?
yeah.
But we do that all the time.
Oh yeah,
right?
we do it absolutely all the
so
time.
So to me, I'm thinking, why wouldn't I be able to pay attention to the lights and still have a conversation with you? Because I did that. Because when we're driving a car, you know, you're reading the CAD, you're on the microphone, you're driving the car.
Yeah, but you're multitasking is what you're talking about. And when people multitask, there's a myth that you can do more than one thing at the same time, and you can't. So when you multitask, you're actually shifting attunement from this to this to this to this to this, and they're micro movements. And the brain's putting it all together and making it look like you're doing it all at once, but you're not.
So there's breaks in between.
Absolutely. You can't really attune to two things at the same time. It just looks like you can. You can't even really brush your teeth and do something else at the same time, because if you notice, you'll pause and you'll shift between one activity and the other. So the brain can't really multitask the way we think it does. But it's a little different from multitasking, because the back and forth that's happening in EMDR and in brain spotting, you're not responsible for it. It's kind of happening passively, and it's happening and it's registering on what we call a subcortical level of the brain. So you've got the thinking brain right here, right? This is the part that develops last in human beings, sometimes up in here, not until mid-20s. But all of this, even though it happens in utero, doesn't really start developing fully until childhood, teens, adulthood.
That's why you do stupid shit when you're younger.
That's why you do stupid. Yeah, nothing's online here. Nothing. You're going to
think
live
mine's
forever,
fully
and
developed.
you're going to die by 20. So, and then underneath the thinking brain, we've got the feeling brain, right? The subcortical brain. And that part of the brain doesn't talk. It doesn't use words. You can't talk to it. That's why talk therapy doesn't work. This is where trauma happens. This is where this part of the brain sends signals to the thinking brain. I'm angry. I'm hungry. That felt good. Whatever it is, trauma is happening. There's an alarm going off. And this part interprets those signals, thinks about them, and makes a decision. When you use talk therapy, you're talking to the thinking part of the brain, and it doesn't affect this part at all. EMDR and brain spotting do. They take where the trauma is actually stored, and it affects it down there. And that bilateral stimulation, the eye movements, the tapping, the sound, that's being registered on the feeling part of the brain, not the thinking part. So you're not really attuning to anything consciously the way you are with the CAD and the talk and the street. It's just happening all subcortically, like we say, or below processing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's where the trauma is stored anyway. So that's what you want to hit with those types of therapy. And they don't require talk. They require just paying attention, being okay with the sensations that the body is having, and sometimes working them out physically. Did that make sense?
I don't know. There's so much information in this right now that it's very overwhelming to me to
Look,
listen
it hurts,
to all of this.
It hurts in this part of the brain right here.
It does. And I feel like I get confused. Once I get overwhelmed, I get way more confused. Like I'm sure you're making complete sense.
And I think, but what's also, two things are happening. First of all, you're not trained in this stuff. And when I sat down the first weekend learning it, I was like, what the stop. I went home and I drank wine.
Yes.
Because it's a lot to take in. But the second thing that's happening is that you're re-exposed all the time, right? You guys are still living with a disorder, an injury, a physiological injury, and that's a drowning man thing. Yeah. And you can't take a drowning man and go, let me tell you about your hippocampus and your amygdala, and here's what's happening inside your brain.
I started off good with good
words.
intentions, like I really want to know this, and then by the third hippocampus, I'm like,
I don't want to know.
But if alarms are still going off and the treatment is ongoing or hasn't been completed, you're not going to take in a lot of information. And I think that's one of the other things that makes me really compassionate for the people I work with, because they'll come in and they're intelligent, brave, wonderful human beings, and they can't take in a sentence. And they'll sit there and go, yeah, they're like, what's wrong with me?
That's why it comes down to, we used to be able to do
so much.
We used to be, felt so much smarter than I am now. I just feel dumb.
Yeah. I feel like this part of my brain is not there.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's not online. If you're suffering from PTSD, that part's not online. You are literally physically drowning. Right? And when you're drowning, that part has to go offline. So think of it this way. If I take that brain and I chuck it at T, you're not going to think. You're going to duck or get hit, right? One of the two. And that is your subcortical brain taking this part offline to survive. Because if this part thinks, you're going to get hit. Oh. So you need to react. You need to not think. And if you're stuck in that cycle of reaction, you're not thinking. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's why my patients feel stupid, or they can't think, or they can't remember things. And it's horrifically sad to me because no one explains to them this is just a drowning man syndrome. There's nothing wrong with your intelligence, your ability, your bravery.
Well, we get told in a very scientific way. And if you can't ask me what I want for dinner, I really don't want to hear big words.
Yeah.
I just want you to dumb it down for me and tell me I'm not as screwed up as I think I am, from what I used to be to what I am now. And that's why the doctors that work with us, they're all genuinely that way. Like, I can just ask you a question and you're going to give it to me. Same with, Dr. Tapia, Dr. White, all of them. And it took, just dumb it down for us.
Yeah.
So you have a funny instrument over there that looks kind of dangerous. So what exactly is brain spotting compared to EMDR? How what's the difference?
The way I view the two, the difference is I see EMDR as a very target-specific approach. So I had a client who had a car accident. She had no history of any other trauma. EMDR is perfect for that. It takes one incident, you focus on that one incident, and you unpair it so that it's not a traumatic memory anymore. Brain spotting works with like an entire file of information. So we're able to take 20 years of career and look at the entire file and let the brain process it in a session or several sessions. And I think it just works much faster. It's doesn't have the restraints of EMDR, which is go back to that target, go back to that target, go back to that target. They're able to just let the brain sit for an extended period of time, look at an entire file of bullshit and dump it. It's kind of like dumping the cookies on your computer. And it makes room for more stuff. So I like when they come to me early on in the career. If I've got someone on with 5-10 years, I think that's brilliant because they're coming in, they're dumping all of that crap and making room for new experiences. Otherwise, it just piles on like cookies on the computer and it slows down the whole system. Okay. What I do with this pointer for brain spotting, the theory behind brain spotting is where you look affects how you feel. So if you do this real quick experiment with me, both of you. I want you to picture what the inside of your kitchen looks like and how many cabinets are in there, and pay attention to, if you guys look at each other, okay? How many?
That threw me off
look
already.
deeply into each other's eyes.
I'm lost.
So I'm supposed to be looking at him, but thinking
But
about
I'm
my
thinking
kitchen.
about T's kitchen because I've been in T's kitchen now.
You're thinking about your
Either
own damn
kitchen, right?
Okay.
Okay, so here comes the question.
Okay.
So you guys look at each other's eyes.
I can't even do this game.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't blink.
Okay.
It's a game. All right. Describe the inside of your closet to each other.
It's a closet. It's got
There's a
clothes
vacuum
on it.
in
I
it.
don't know. It's got a chessboard in there.
How big is the closet?
Very tiny.
T, how big's your closet? Okay, there went her eyes. So if you guys could see closer, little micro movements of the eyes. The eyes will move around, find the file, and come back to give the answer. There used to be a theory that if you look to the left, you look to the right, they're lying, they're telling the truth, right? But that's not really as cut and dry as we thought it was. People will search for an answer or a file. There's a space that their eyes go to that correlates to a neurological cluster of information. Grab it and come back and give the info.
Yeah.
People always do that. And you can watch where their eyes are going for those spots. So what I do is I find, or I help you find, or you find a spot that correlates to whatever that file is that we're looking at. So if someone comes in and I got a cop telling me, I'm just tired of the bullshit. Okay, where do you feel that in your body? Right here. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want you to notice where you feel that. And I'm going to take the pointer or use the mandala behind you. That's how we undo it. We just poke their eyes out.
I'm going to whack you with this really.
And I'll ask them, does it feel stronger here? Or I'll move this way? Or we'll go this way. And as we're moving across the visual field, they're going to notice either they feel a stronger gut feeling on one of those points along the continuum, and then we'll also go up and down. And where it feels the strongest, we'll hold right there. And I'm going to say, okay, I want you to hold right here. I've got headphones on, and there's bilateral stimulation, which is music or sound going from one side to the other, again, for that learning process. And they're just going to hold right there and notice the sensation and whatever comes with it. It's not guided. That's it. So basically, I tell them I'm going to hold a stick and you're going to listen to music and you're going to get better. And so they'll stare at the stick.
Oh, there's nothing voodoo
No
about
voodoo
that.
there. That doesn't sound like bullshit at all.
No.
And so they'll hold, and what'll happen is when we find that one spot, they're going to get a really strong sensation. It's the subcortical or the feeling brain is going to really spike up. It's going to get upset. Then it's going to calm itself down. So this is really the key to brain spotting that I love. In talk therapy, I can make anybody giggle and feel good because I like telling all kinds of stories, right? You're going to leave here and you're going to feel really great. Then you're going to go home, stuff's going to go wrong, and you're going to fall apart again. In brain spotting, we teach your brain to calm itself down. It learns by processing those files to get upset and bring itself back down to a level of okay. And it teaches it all by itself. So I work with childhood sexual abuse is my second specialty besides first responders. And these people come in and they're not able to regulate, right? Their emotions are all kinds of out of control and running their lives. And their brains learn to regulate themselves using brain spotting. So we'll hold sometimes the entire session right there. And they can talk or not talk. And my clients will start saying, oh, okay. They'll start remembering details. They'll get very worked up. We'll work through movements if we need to. And inevitably within the hour, they'll go, you know what? It's kind of loosened. It's come down. Okay. So, and a lot of times the goal for what we end up doing with all of my guys is whatever call it was or whatever culmination of calls looks more faded. They'll go, I can't quite see it. It's not as sharp, or it just looks white, or I'm really distant from it now. And that's what we want. The memory should look distant. You shouldn't be living it. You shouldn't be feeling the fear. It's very intensive. It's extremely exhausting. Everybody reports being tired.
Worse than EMDR?
Much worse.
Oh my God. I don't
I'll
want to do
have
that. I
people-
don't like that game.
We'll have to try it.
I don't like that game.
People will fall asleep in session sometimes. They'll get tired right afterwards or within 24 hours. Usually they report the best sleep they've ever had. And that's when you process better. And then the memory will look different most of the time within one session, sometimes a few. They could shift their focus. They can close their eyes. It's an amazing therapy. If they can't feel, and a lot of my guys can't feel because, again, you guys are used to compartmentalizing, right? It doesn't benefit you to feel. And if you did, you would not be able to continue with your careers. You can't go to a place, feel fear, and then push it down and go. You just have to not feel. So my guys are really good, and women, at that, not feeling anything. So I will look for neurological signs that tell me that that's where the spot is. Because a lot of them can't feel anything. I don't feel anything. Okay, so I'm going to run this along the spot. I'm going to look for neurological responses that correspond to that sensation you said you had, and I'm going to hold there for you.
While asking them a question, or just
to notice, you said when you came in, you're tired of the bullshit. And you said you kind of feel it in your chest, but not really. Yeah. Okay. So I just want you to notice that you're tired of it. And I'll run it along the continuum. I'll find a spot where I see a neurological response, and I'll just hold there. And I'll say, just notice what you notice. And it's light speed into whatever's going on in the brain. It's really very fascinating.
It's like a magic wand.
Wow.
It is like a magic wand.
Sounds magic-y.
It is.
I hold a
It's like
stick,
very
you listen to
Harry
sound,
Wow.
and then I bill you.
Yeah. That'll be $3,000, please. It's like the God shot.
Yeah.
So can you
God
do
shot.
this incorrectly and fuck someone up?
Yes.
Which we know
Yeah.
is true because
So-
we've had people get screwed
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Going to the
there's
person
there's
that thought
potential
they
for
were-
a lot of danger. Yeah, we know that.
Well, how
person.
do you
Same
okay.
with the EMDR though too.
Absolutely.
So
Brain
how do
spotting
you
and
know, right? If somebody is in another state, we have
How do
people that
we
follow us.
know?
How do we know, like, the first time that they're doing it correctly? Because the first time I went in and Robbie was telling me about EMDR, I'm like, I'm not doing that shit. I don't know
Yeah.
who you are. I don't know what you're going to do. How do you make the determination as a patient that this person understands what it is they're doing? Because we're very trusting and respectful of the profession, but we're still
yeah.
suspect of it as well.
Yeah.
Until
Oh,
you're
yeah.
not. Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Until I walk out and I'm fried and I'm fucking seeing shit.
Yeah,
Well, until
I-
they do or say something that you're like, nope, and then I'm now shut down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the guys I was talking to it wasn't a patient of mine, but I remember he told me that he went to a counselor that he had described to them what we call dissociation. I'm driving and then I don't know where I am. And that's a freeze and collapse response. It's where the brain just shuts down and you go into a place of waiting for the threat to end. But again, it's default, right? We don't pick going into these states. They just happen when you've got PTSD. Your brain's just defaulting to either fight or flight, freeze and collapse. And this therapist said, I've never heard of that. So this guy spent the next couple of years going, there's something wrong with my brain because I trusted a professional. I went to them and they said they never heard of this. And this is one of the most common things, dissociation.
Same fucking, I bet it's the same therapist. No good.
It might have been, yeah.
I'm
Which,
telling you.
how? Well, anyway.
Because you know what the
yeah.
statement was? And I've heard that statement before was, there's no logical reason you should be experiencing what you're saying, what you're explaining.
Not true.
And
I
when
like
somebody
to,
says that to you,
yeah.
But we're not going to know. We're
Makes
not
you-
going to know that
No,
that's right
no,
or wrong.
and that's where you get one shot, right? Many of these people, because they finally decided to go, and that does not happen for a cop. How many cops go to therapy?
Oh my gosh.
You finally take
Yeah,
the
you know.
step. You go to therapy. You sit in front of someone, and they go, "I've never heard of this," or "There's something wrong with you," or
Right.
maybe it's the job you need to quit, and this is your life, right?
Yep.
Every cop I know, this is their calling, and you're telling them that they're doing the wrong thing now. So what to look for? That's a good question. Do not go to anyone who is trained in EMDR or brain spotting that doesn't have some sort of national recognized training. If they're trained in brain spotting, they should have a certificate from brainspotting.org. They should not have done an online training. They should not have looked at the DVDs or read the book and done it. They should have in-person consultation, face-to-face training. Same with EMDR. They should have ongoing training. It shouldn't be a one and done thing. I took a weekend, I'm good, I'm going to hold a stick, and you're going to notice the bad things.
Should it happen the first day you walk into the treatment?
Brain spotting?
Any of this?
Not really. No, there should be a level of safety established first and some stabilization.
Okay.
You should never, and this really upset me, you should never walk into a doctor's office or a therapist's office, have them put a light bar in front of you, and then they just sit you there.
Yep.
On the first visit.
It's happened.
And that has happened. These stories are horrific to me. You shouldn't be put in front of buzzies and left alone there, thinking about your worst call, ever. I mean, I could do this shit at home. I put a pointer in front of me and sit and think about my worst day and be all alone and lose my mind. Part of the important part of treatment is therapeutic relationship. If you don't know me, I'm not there to hold a space for you. So there has to be some kind of a relationship built. You have to trust that I'm going to be there if stuff gets scary or crappy. You need to trust that I'm going to guide you if something comes up and you need to tell me about it. Right? I can't have my back to you while you're sitting with buzzies thinking about what happened on the worst call. So you have to have that relationship, and you have to have safety and backup. What do I do if this gets really out of control? If you haven't figured that out first, then you're not doing therapy right, because they need to know what that backup plan is. And the last thing you want to look for before you find a therapist is, are they trained in first responders? Not my husband was one, my dad was one, I read a book. Do they have actual training in the physiology of what happens to first responders? Otherwise, what we talked about at the beginning, you're depressed. You have this.
Right.
Which is one of the biggest problems, is that we don't have a lot of those, right?
No, there's not very many, because what ends up happening is they see a first responder, or we've seen from work comp, is they will get a doctor or clinician to come out and say, it was pre-existing, you had mommy or daddy issues, or you were screwed up before you became a cop, or adjustment disorder. That's a fucking huge thing.
Hey, guess who has that supposedly?
You got it. Well, guess what?
Supposedly, that's what I have
For $19.95, I got a DVD, and I'll do brain spotting on you, and we'll be good.
Well, the good
news...
news...
you just watch the DVD.
Yeah, the good news is I no longer have PTSD. I have adjustment disorder.
Yes. And you know what?
You've been upgraded.
After sitting,
I'm supposedly upgraded.
Yeah, after sitting here with Lauren, I can tell you adjustment disorders in this area.
Happens right up in there where you think.
Yeah, right here. But
you're going to end up with the wrong diagnosis. You're going to end up with misinformation. You're going to end up thinking there's something wrong with you. You're going to, and clinicians don't mean to harm. None of us goes into this business to hurt other people. So you can have great intentions and go, well, yeah, I was with crisis response, so I'm a first responder. I know what that feels like. It's just no. If you don't understand the physiology specific to first responders, it's really out of the scope of your practice to be working with them, and it's irresponsible. And I do know a lot of good clinicians who have experience working with first responders, but still don't know the basic physiology of how their brains change and their bodies change. There's differences you can see, and they're not like other people with PTSD.
So before we wrap up, why does it present so different in police and fire than someone who had let's say years of sexual abuse? Does it present different?
Yeah, it does.
Well, yes.
It does
Haven't
present
you already
different.
explained that? See, I did.
Yeah,
hear that
absolutely.
Part
You
already.
did explain that in the beginning.
I did, but let me recap it. So there's a difference for a couple of reasons. There's also a
hurts.
difference between combat vets. So you can't. People will lump combat vets or veterans with first responders and think that they're the same thing. PTSD, right? Typically in combat, you're going to see a short amount of time because they're not going to leave you in theater for 20 years,
Yeah.
right? But a cop is in theater for 20 years, and every shift is theater, and it's not for short bursts, right? You're not flying a mission for 4 hours and then going back to base. You're on a 10, 12-hour shift, and you are in a constant state of hypervigilance. You have to be. The ones who aren't are the ones who get hurt, right? So a cop has to be, from the beginning of shift to end of shift, in the state of hypervigilance that they ask you to be in, that keeps you safe, right? You're in a constant scanning state. So that's number one. So you have a different physiology that's going on. It's even different for firefighters because they have some downtime until the tone comes.
Oh,
They
they
cook.
have a lot of downtime.
They cook in their dine. And Lauren, they cook.
I love my firefighters.
And they go shopping on
but
duty.
it's different,
Downtime.
right? But it's different. They face a different type of threat for shorter term.
Right.
But it's, and they get the downtime, right? So I know there's a lot of difference between the two.
Huge.
But even their PTSD looks different. So when you take a cop and you've got this extended shift, especially if you're doing night shift, if you're doing swing shift, right? Because that's a different time when the brain's supposed to be sleeping. No brain is meant to be up overnight. So you expose it for those constant hours of hypervigilance. That's piece number one, totally different from any other field on the planet. Piece number two is you've got the shoving down of all of that normal response that we all have. So what looks exciting for you guys, we're going to run in there and do this, is a typical nope from everybody else. And I'm not going to get political, but I'm going to say this is where it frustrates me with how you guys are treated, because to say that what you're experiencing is not outside the realm of normal human experience is not true. Right? It's normal for a cop to see these things, but it is not a normal human thing. And so to say that you're somehow different and that you're going to be okay experiencing these types of things because you're a cop is a complete fallacy. You're a human being with a brain that reacts the way everyone else's does.
And that comes across as them saying, this is what you're trained for. Because that's what they say.
Yeah.
Well, that's what work comp says,
yeah.
you know, in the situation.
And that might be true, but just because you're trained to take a beating doesn't mean your body isn't going to be beaten down. Right? You're still going to have effects. So whether you're trained or not trained for it, expected to see it every single day and get used to it, it's still not a normal human experience, and you're going to be affected. And that is the difference. So it's going to present different. It's going to look different. It's going to be treated differently. It's not going to be treated like you would a vet or a sexual abuse victim. My approach with them is very, very different.
Cool.
Well, before we wrap up, Tanya, there's a pop quiz. And I'd like you to name each part of the brain.
The bean. What's the bean?
What's the bean name?
Oh, gosh.
Come on, T.
Demicula.
There's the
We've
bean.
talked
There's
about
the
bean
bean
before. You know I like the bean. Yeah.
We have no idea what you're doing.
That's a brain. There you go.
It's a brain, and it's broken.
The end.
The end.
So I thank you very much, Lauren, for taking the time out, and thank the fine gentleman with the funny shoes for spending time and allowing you to break at least an hour worth of time. He's my hero.
I think that this did a lot of explaining, because I've been dealing with this since 2015, and I learned some things today. So
good.
It was good.
I hope it helped. I hope it made sense.
It did.
There's a lot of.
I'm healed now, I believe. Yeah.
And we'll have you back, when we have more questions, because I know people are going to have questions about what you guys talk about. So I do appreciate it.
There's a ton of it. I'm full, so I'm not plugging for new patients. I am not plugging for new patients. But EastValleyTraumaCounseling.com, there is a section on my website called First Responders. Ton of information. Other links, places you could go, information, statistics on first responder suicide, what PTSD looks like in first responders, books you could read, all that kind of stuff.
We can't read.
Nope.
I can barely listen to audiobooks, much less try to read a book.
There's a ton of information there for families and for first responders.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. And, we got to wrap up because Game of Thrones is on tonight.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm excited because Khaleesi's going to kill everybody.
Oh.
I just ruined the plot.
I don't even know who that is.
All right. So thank you again.
Thank you.
T, again.
You're welcome.
To us and those like us.
Sure.
And we'll do it again soon.